We have new developments in the case of 5-year-old Liam Ramos, the boy with the bunny ears, detained by ICE last month. At an asylum hearing Friday, a judge denied the Trump administration's bid to expedite the deportation of Liam and his family, at least for now. The family was granted what's called a continuance, which postpones the case to a later date. That's according to a statement from Liam's school superintendent, and it's unclear when they're due in court next. But DHS denies that their removal was being expedited. Liam and his bunny ears have captured the country's attention, but he is just one of many young children being targeted by this administration, supposedly in pursuit of the, quote, worst of the worst. Our very own Jacob Soboroff has new and exclusive reporting on a 2-year-old toddler and her dad who were taken by federal agents from Minneapolis last month. Take a watch.
My reaction was to lock the car and not open it. They kept telling me to roll down the window or open the door. I just hugged my baby. Then one agent, I think he was Mexican, told me to call my wife so she could take the baby.
So you thought it was a trap?
Yes.
Joining us now, MS Now senior political and national reporter Jacob Soboroff, Jordan Foster, a PhD candidate in clinical psychology at Yale University, and Maya Wiley, a former assistant U.S. attorney and civil prosecutor. Jacob, I want to start with you and your amazing reporting, very moving reporting there. Elvis, the father who you interviewed, has since signed a self-deportation order, as I understand it, which means he and his family are going back to Ecuador. What more can you tell us about how they came to that decision?
Well, Catherine, he didn't want to ever put himself in the situation that he found himself and his 2-year-old daughter, Chloe, found herself ever again. And just to back up, what we're doing here is following in Antonio's footsteps. This is the second installment of our Cities Under Siege series here at MS Now, where we're doing deep dives into what these tactics of these large-scale mass deportation efforts really look like. And the way we came upon Elvis and Chloe's story is that on January 22nd, I was reporting in Minneapolis, driving around. I think we have some of the footage. And I rolled up on a South Minneapolis intersection, an alley, where there were an incredible amount of ICE and Border Patrol and federal agents, Bureau of Prisons folks. This is surveillance footage that was obtained by our very own Kay Guerrero. You can see Elvis and 2-year-old Chloe there. We didn't know when we were at the end of the alley who they were apprehending, why they were apprehending them, or what actually they were doing. And it turns out it wasn't a situation where they were going after the so-called worst of the worst. Elvis and Chloe were going to buy some fruit at the market. He says he was racially profiled. They followed him into that alley and they smashed the window, took little Chloe and him out of the car. And they said they cut Chloe in the process. I want to play a little bit more of what Elvis had to say to me about what that actually was like. Watch this.
When they broke the window, she started crying. And when the glass shattered, my baby's little hand was right there. She had red marks and some blood.
As you heard him say, not only did Chloe get cut, and we asked the Department of Homeland Security about this, and they didn't get back to us about medical treatment or anything like that. Elvis says Chloe didn't get any treatment. The larger story here is, number one, the story of Elvis and Chloe is the same as Liam and his parents. He believes that Chloe was used as bait to get his wife, Nicole, out into the alley so that they could apprehend them all. She didn't come out, but ultimately they're all going to go back to Ecuador together. The second point I think is important to underscore is that you don't have a mass deportation policy without going after, even if it is a toned down, softened approach, whatever Trump said the other day, you don't have a mass deportation policy without going after people without criminal records. And Elvis didn't have one. The government said he tried to enter the country once and then came back and had a felony reentry. He disputes that. And when we took it back to DHS, they didn't have an answer for that either. So all this to say, this is what mass deportation looks like. Chloe, Elvis, Liam, his parents, what we've been seeing play out in Minneapolis and across the country as well.
Jordan, what happens to children exposed to this kind of violence, to these interactions, who spend extended periods of time detained in places like these facilities, these warehouses that the administration is planning not just to continue using, but actually to expand right now?
What is happening right now is incredibly traumatic for children, adolescents, adults, and families. Mass deportation is family separation, and family separation is traumatic. Liam, a 5-year-old, detained for 2 weeks, a young father and his 2-year-old daughter separated and detained. This trauma is pervasive, and the science on this is clear. When children are exposed to trauma and stress and violence like this, it can have profound effects on brain development, behavioral development, and mental health. There's decades of research to show that when children are exposed to this type of violence, to family separation, it can lead to disruptions in connections between different parts of the brain, such as the amygdala, a part of the brain that's very important for fear processing, and the prefrontal cortex, a region of the brain that's very important for regulation. When there are disruptions between these regions, that can have cascading effects on children's development of emotion regulation skills, emotion processing. It can affect how the body responds to stress in the future. And all of this can lead to the development of different mental health symptoms like anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder.
I want to get to something that is happening more and more, and that has to do with the way law enforcement, specifically these ICE agents, are going into people's private properties and private spaces, whether it's a car, whether it's a home, or whether it's a business. And I want you to kind of set the law clear as day for us here, because we hear this sometimes rhetorically that there's attempts to negotiate with the current funding bill whether or not they can impose on ICE agents to have judicial warrants. What is the law state as of today, irrespective of any negotiations between Democrats and Republicans as to whether or not ICE agents have the constitutional power to go into somebody's house or somebody's business or somebody's car, purely, as we heard there in Jacob's reporting, racially profiling them in order to detain them and then ultimately put them in deportation procedures?
This is high school constitution government. This isn't even
AP.
This isn't even like law school 101 right now. It's called the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. You're supposed to have some kind of probable cause to think that you have legal authority to go snatch somebody.
Is the color of somebody's skin probable cause in this country?
Well, since we fought a civil war, no.
What does Kavanaugh say?
I am saying this because it is straight up a violation of the U.S. Constitution to racially profile. What we're seeing are roving gangs of masked men trying to bust down people's home doors, cars. That's personal property. If you're inside your car, busting open a window, unless you have probable cause for a crime being committed, you're violating the law. Unless you have a warrant and some reason to have, and there's a difference between a judicial warrant and an administrative warrant. Let's be very clear on this, because this is part of the debate that's happening. A judicial warrant just means an actual judge signed it. That means an independent arbiter said, I think you do have sufficient cause to go and arrest this person. ICE also has what's called an administrative warrant. That's just a bureaucrat signing a piece of paper saying, yeah, go get this person. That's not independent. That's not seeing a judge. That's not neutral evidence, which means you could literally, in this administration, we have no reason to trust that they're not just signing paperwork saying, I'm going to give you permission to go get anybody you want for any reason you want. So that's also why we're having a debate about getting a judge to actually sign it.
Jordan, I'm wondering if you could provide any advice based on your own research about how parents and teachers should be talking to children who are not only those who are going through the most traumatic experiences, like the ones we've just seen, people getting pulled out of cars, but they're seeing these law enforcement agents, masked, armed law enforcement agents on their streets. They're seeing their kids, their classmates being pulled out of school. Presumably, there's like a lot of trauma to go around and a lot of fear to go around. So how should the safe adults, the loved adults in these children's lives, talk to kids about this?
Absolutely, and it's exactly what you're saying. What we're seeing, the traumatic effects right now extend beyond individual children and families who are being targeted by ICE. It's impacting everyone, schools, neighborhoods, broader communities. Parents, understandably, might be very worried about how to talk to my child, how to support my child right now. What I can say from my experience as a researcher, as well as a clinician who provides services to children and adolescents who've experienced trauma, is that parents likely have had some of these conversations before. What I would say is that it is recommended that parents first take a step, check in with yourself. Parents are likely having a lot of reactions right now to what is going on. It is understandable and it makes sense that parents often want to rush to help their child as soon as possible. But taking a step and thinking about, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What are my own reactions to what is going on before engaging with your child can be very grounding. I would also, for parents, I would have them clarify to themselves, what is the goal of this conversation? Is it to make my child and help my child feel safe? Is it to provide information? Is it to correct some misinformation that this child might be hearing? All of that is very important. And then when you're talking to your child, making sure you're validating and listening to your child. Sometimes just repeating what your child is saying to you can be a good indication to your child that you're there for them.
Jacob, I want to ask you really quickly before we have to go. You reported on Annie Lucia Lopez Bellosa. She was just deported out of the country despite a judge's order, and a judge asked the administration to try to facilitate her return. Do you know what's happening to her right now? Is she able to make it back to the United States?
It's just another form of family separation, Antonia, and the government is arguing that because she had a deportation order, even though she was a college student going to see her, came here at 8 years old, going to see her mom and dad for Thanksgiving, that she's not eligible to come back to the U.S. But I guarantee her lawyers are going to fight that. And I just want to echo, before we go, what Jordan said. I know Dylan G. Well, his colleague at Yale, and I know she would also agree with me in endorsing what Physicians for Human Rights said about family separation, that it met the United Nations definition of torture, what the American Academy of Pediatrics called it, government-sanctioned child abuse. And Jordan hit the nail on the head. Mass deportation is family separation. It's why I encourage everyone, I don't know if we can put it back up, to scan that QR code on the bottom right-hand part of the screen so that they can go and see this reporting in detail, the documentary we made, the article that we wrote about all of this, because this is what's happening in this country every day as part of this effort, and it's time not to look away.
And we did manage to get that QR code up on the screen. Jacob Soboroff, thank you for your incredible reporting. As always, make sure to catch the rest of that series that Jacob was talking about. Jordan Foster, thank you. Maya, please stay with us.